And joining the table, we have Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio. He joins us now. Joe is under the weather, but Senator, let's start talking about the shutdown. There are these show votes happening. They're not going to get the job done. Can the Senate create some sort of end to this shutdown?
Of course the Senate can. Mitch McConnell has to do his job.
How?
What we did 5 weeks ago before the government was shut down, we passed a resolution unanimously, a continuing resolution. Vice President Pence had told the Republican caucus lunch earlier that day that to go ahead with this, the president would sign it, and then the right-wing attack machine, after we passed it unanimously, the right-wing attack machine went to work. Paul Ryan, with his tail between his legs, ended his ignominious, I've always wanted to use that word in Morning Joe. Ignominious career on a high note, and the government shut down. And President Trump is not going to end this. We all know if he gets the $5 billion that 3 months from now, whether it's the debt ceiling, whether it's another opportunity like this, he shuts the government down again and demands. So this is a $30 billion wall. This is only $5 billion. So he's going to keep doing this. We know that. So Mitch McConnell's got to stand up and do his job and open the government, and we'll all be there for him.
Okay, I don't disagree with a lot of what you've said, but if Mitch McConnell sticks with the president and the president won't budge on the wall, there's a lot of suffering. We're in day 33. Are the Democrats going to hold to their position, and this is going to continue as is indefinitely?
Democrats understand if we give him the $5 billion, as I said, he does it again and again and again, and you can't run the government that way. I mean, I wish President Trump and I wish Mitch McConnell would do some of the things that Lincoln used to talk about, getting out of the White House and getting your public opinion baths. And I talk to TSA agents all the time. They talk to me about at airports. I'll walk around at different gates. They talk about going to their bank to try to get a break on their mortgage. They talk about going to their landlord. They've got to get child care because they're still working.
So
how do you tell a child care person to wait 3 months for your pay?
Senator, the easy part of this is covering the suffering. We understand the suffering that is happening out there clearly, and we will continue to do so. But the question for you is, how can Democrats come up with a solution? Now, you've already said what Mitch McConnell should do, can do. What can Democrats do, though, to bring this to an end?
Well, we continue to offer. We obviously support strong border security. We are all sickened by what's happened at the border with children taken away from their parents. We understand that technology and more border agents and more and helicopters and all can keep our borders safe. But the choice is either give President Trump the $5 billion, knowing it'll encourage him to do it again, and we'll have a worse problem the next time and a worse problem after that, or to continue to organize in our communities to put pressure on Republican senators. I mean, this generation of Republican senators is not going to go down in history as having the strongest, most vibrant backbones of any senators, of any U.S. Senate in history. I mean, they've got to stand up. Cory Gardner started understanding he's in a state where he faces re-election, in a difficult state that he'll recarry. But other senators are beginning to hear this from their TSA agents. And, one group that's almost never talked about is the federal contractors who prepare the food workers, the custodians, the security people at federal buildings who make $12 to $15 an hour. They're totally forgotten. They've lost their jobs. They're now going to payday lenders, and that downward spiral that will cost them maybe eviction in the end. And nobody, when we reopen the government, they have never been taken care of in the past. That's something that Senator Smith and I in Minnesota are working on. That we can't continue to operate the government this way.
And that's a group that's outside the 800,000 federal workers we've been talking about. I want to show our viewers, you say you want them to move closer to you, Republicans. It looks like they're moving a lot closer to the president's position. Let's hear what Senator Mitt Romney had to say yesterday.
Is there any discussion within your colleagues in the Senate about, trying to put together something that would get 67 votes, which would be enough to override a presidential veto? Because that's your power under Article 1. You are a co-equal branch.
No question. I think it's extremely unlikely that Republicans would say we're not going to follow the president's lead on this. Now, who knows what happens a long, long time from now, and what kind of a occurrences there might be. But I think Republicans are going to say, look, the president is negotiating on our behalf. We're going to try and work with the White House, not against the White House.
So what do you do with that, Senator Brown? You've got a president, as you said, who's not moving off his $5.7 billion figure. And now it looks like some even the more moderate Republicans who you might be able to work with are moving toward his position. There's no point of overlap here. It appears from the people that you're talking about who aren't getting their paychecks, there's no way through this.
I think that, I mean, of course, Senator Romney is going to, Senator Romney took some real hits inside his caucus for showing a shred of courage in his first day in office when he spoke out. So I think he feels a little burned by his colleagues talking to him, and I heard some of those conversations. And they're not going to say right now, okay, we're going to go from 3 Republicans to 25 to have a veto. I think it's a question of the pressure builds, and then there's a tipping point when Republicans realize, my gosh, we can't keep doing this, because the public blames them. The public blames all of us. I get that. But the Republicans blame them. Maybe the president can find a way to get Mexico to pay for it. That was the original promise that the right wing seems to have forgotten.
So what do you say to those workers? Because you've been in Ohio, you've been talking to them. They're now on Friday coming up on missing a second paycheck. We're into our second month now of this shutdown. When they ask you what the hell's going on, what do you say to them?
They overwhelmingly, the workers I talked to, nobody has had a harsh word for me in terms of being angry at me. They're all frustrated. They all share their stories. And mostly they all blame the president. And they know that he's dug in on a proposal that the country doesn't support, that we know that the president is always about dividing people and upending things and preaching his phony populism while the White House looks like a retreat for Wall Street executives and cares only about those issues. I mean, I've seen in Ohio with the closing of the announced closing of the Lordstown General Motors plant that this president is people are beginning, even people that voted for him, to see that they have betrayed, that he has betrayed workers. That's sticking to him. He understands that. I think then we begin to get Republicans siding with us to reopen the government. And I mean, we're not close to a veto override yet, but those numbers will come quickly once they start.
That could take a long time, though.
It's already taken, well, I hope not. It's already taken way longer than it should. And again, I think if Mitch McConnell and some of my Republican colleagues would go out and get their public opinion bass and really not just say, hey, how are you, TSA agent, but what does this mean to you? What's happened with your kids? Do you have a spouse that has a job? If you're a single parent, what are you doing with child care? How are you paying your mortgage? Is your bank or your credit union giving you a break on interest? All the kinds of problems they face while they're protecting us. The Coast Guard, the Border Patrol, all of these.
So, Senator, we've been talking about the shutdown for some time now. And the rule of thumb used to be that if you miss a week's pay, it takes you a month to catch up. But there's a lot more going on with this presidency than just the shutdown. And, you say that if you give him the $5.6 billion, he'll just do this over and over again. But there's also NATO. There's also the Mueller investigation. So let me ask you, do you think that Donald J. Trump presents a clear and present danger to our democracy?
I think more and more people are concerned what he means around the world. I mean, I don't know if I'd say that exactly. I would say that whoever the new president is, one of the first things that president needs to do is reassure NATO and re-engage at the Paris Climate Accords and re-look at what we do with Iran to make sure they aren't on the path to nuclear weapons, and look at a trade regimen that I was opposed to TPP, but I also think we need to engage in the world with trade policy that's oriented towards workers and the dignity of work, not towards corporate interests, which our trade policy has always been. That's why I voted against them consistently. I think we need a president that engages that way. This president's clearly not going to do that, but having somebody with the incredible skills of Nancy Pelosi in the House, I think, keeps him from being the danger that he would be if she weren't there moderating and tempering him.
Senator, I've covered a number of these shutdowns and near shutdowns over the past several years, and you're right, it has become a tool, and I can see your point that you don't want to set a precedent, but the way out has always been some kind of a temporary spending bill, some kind of a face-saving measure where maybe you agree to have a discussion that will include some funds that include what the experts say we need, like reinforced structures? Is there really not some kind of a middle ground, some kind of a bridge where you are not caving to him? You're not giving him the money, but you're agreeing to have this discussion over some funds for things that the experts say we actually need?
Well, yeah, sure there is. If there's a guarantee the government opens, and we can then do those real negotiations. The problem, in part, dealing with this president is he made an agreement on DACA one time and on a border wall, and then he changed his mind because the right wings. I mean, this is a president that doesn't. This will shock all of you. That doesn't really have a lot of depth and strong views about these issues, and so he's malleable. I've been in meetings with him on trade and taxes, and his depth of understanding is shocking, even to all of you who, or lack of understanding, even to all of you who cover him when you're in a meeting with him. And so he doesn't have any basis upon which to, dig in and have a real strong view, unless it's something like the wall that's a political thing for him. And so he changes his position often when the right wing weighs in with him. And
so you could just call it a wall. Just do some.
But I mean, I'm open to all kinds of things, and I think Democrats are too. But let's open the government. Let's then negotiate where we need to do on what we need to do on all of these, and we can come to an agreement then. But this holding the wall over these 800,000 people, and as you say, the tens of thousands of workers that don't work directly for the government, that work for a contractor, that are living paycheck to paycheck. I mean, what kind of country is this?
Well, Senator, I think we all can agree on that. But just to help our viewers understand the Democratic position, is this a fiscal matter or is this a moral matter? Because on a fiscal basis, $5 billion is a tenth of 1% of our government spending. It's about $50 for an average American. Even if you do the whole $30 billion over a period of years, it's still a tenth of a percent. It's a trivial amount of money in the great scheme of our federal finances. Or is it a moral issue that Democrats simply don't believe there should be a wall? There could be other kinds of security, but not a wall. So help us out.
Well, I would take door number 3. We
I only gave you 2 doors.
I know you did, but I'm walking through the third. It's one of the joys of being a morning Joe. The third wall, the third option that is the most constraining and the most troubling is that it sets the pace for him doing this again and again. And you can call it a fiscal issue, you can call it a moral issue, but in the end, we can't run the government with a president that can take one issue and dig in and shut the government down over that, particularly when there's a political party in this country now that is totally the president's political party. I've been in Congress for more than a couple of decades now. I've never seen a president that has this hold over his political party, that they will do, no matter how immoral and how badly directed, they will do whatever he wants them to, like they've done now. No matter his poll ratings, and as elections get closer and his polls stay as low as they are, Republicans tend to jump away. But that's not happened in the numbers we hope for.
How do you explain that, Senator? It's a question we've asked around the table for a long time. What is it about this president that inspires that kind of loyalty, regardless of what he says?
Well, I think it's 2 things. It's one, they're getting everything they want. They're getting tax cuts for the rich. They're getting right-wing young judges, and they're getting a tax on environmental and women's rights and environmental issues and weakening regulations and all the things that their big billionaire contributors have wanted on labor, on energy, on oil, on environment, all that. And the other thing, they're scared of their base, but they're scared of the base in part. The Trump base is shrinking, but it's so solid because no Republicans stand up to them. If you live in Indiana, you're a Republican, you like Trump, you never hear Indiana Republican House members or senators criticize the president. So why would you not continue to be loyal? So there aren't many Jeff Flakes that have been critical of him, as you've covered on this show lots of times over the last couple of years.
Senator Michael Steele's in Washington with a question for you.
Senator, just real quickly, I want to go back to this idea of how the president is using this as a leverage for possible future threats to shut down the government. You have within your own Democratic caucus a Democrat, Representative Colin Perkins of Minnesota, Peterson, of Minnesota, who said give Trump the money
but put some strings on that. Couldn't you go down that road, or Democrats thinking about going down that road, and making one of those strings that you cannot in future discussions leverage federal workers, shut down the government in order to get your way? What does that say about potential cracks in the Democrats' wall to stop the president's efforts? And what does it say about opportunities to maybe create a space to find a way to move this thing forward?
Yeah, I think Democrats are open to any ideas that don't just entice the president to do it again. I don't know how you put strings on a bill saying the president can't keep acting like a jerk. I mean, I don't know how you do that. This president finds ways to do it no matter how constrained or confined in his life. I'm open to, I served with Congressman Peterson. He and I worked together in my first year in Congress against the fight against the North American Free Trade Agreement. So I worked with him. I worked with Ag. Work on the Ag Committee with him. We actually got, to show that this place can work, we got 87 votes in the Senate on an agriculture bill that's good for conservation and keeping Lake Erie clean, and good for food stamps, and good for family farmers. We can do things when we put our minds to it, but when we have a president that's so dug in, that's a bigot, that does all of this, it makes it that much harder. I'm open to what Colin might propose. I don't know the details.
Let's go back to Lordstown and plant closings. What do you think can be done, if anything, about restoring unions that have been diminished so badly over the past 20, 25 years? They're a key part of the economy. Can anything be done to bring back union strength?
Sure. We missed by one vote 7 or 8 or 9 years ago the Employee Free Choice Act. That would have made a difference for organizing unions. We start with, we now have a Supreme Court that puts its thumb on the scales of justice for corporations over workers and Wall Street over consumers. But one of the ways you do that, I've introduced legislation. I talked to the president. He said he liked it. Then the next day his staff said he didn't. Very explicitly called the American Cars American Jobs Act, and it would take away the Trump tax break. The new tax law says if you shut down production in Youngstown, Ohio, and move it to Mexico, you go from a 21% to a 10.5% tax rate. You get a 50% off coupon. It would take the money from closing that loophole and provide a rebate at the dealership for American cars made 50% made in America, which is about 95 different models. We could do some things like that. That's not direct empowering unions and strengthening unions. We know, I was talking to Dee Taylor, head of the Culinary Workers Union, and he was citing that 50% of Americans in a Pew poll, I think it was a Pew poll, would join a union if they had the opportunity. I was just talking to staff of MSNBC and how, the people that do the makeup and some of the on-air people and the people behind the cameras here, too often the company can just dictate their hours, and if you don't have protections for a union, it means you arrange childcare for next Tuesday and the company decides to call you in on Monday and Wednesday instead. Workers have lost, the whole dignity of work is workers have lost so much of their place and authority in the workplace if they don't have a union. So unions are about better wages and better benefits. It's also about a less flexible, a less inflexible schedule where the company in that sense owns you.
So, Senator, I want to ask you about 2020. The field is growing for sure. Of course, it was a big moment when America elected Barack Obama, the first African-American president. Never thought I'd see that in my lifetime. And then we elected a reality TV host. A lot of people didn't see that coming. So I guess given the field, I have to ask you, is America ready for a middle-aged white guy from Ohio?
Well, I think, we'll see. Connie and I are thinking very seriously about this. We're going on a 4-state, a couple days in each state, dignity of work listening tour. To me, no matter who the presidential nominee is, it has to be somebody, it should be somebody whose centerpiece of the campaign is dignity of work. I've seen so many national Democrats look at this as you either speak to the progressive base or you speak to workers, working class voters of all races. And if we have to choose between the two, we lose. To win Ohio and to win the industrial Midwest, the heartland, and to win the Electoral College, you've got to speak to the progressive base, to be sure, as I have my whole career, but you've got to talk to workers, and you've got to live where they live in terms of if you love your country, you fight for the people who make it work. And too often, Washington, as I said, the White House looks like a retreat for Wall Street executives, except on the days it looks like a retreat for the gun lobby. And people aren't fighting for or talking to workers. It's a physical therapist in Reno or working at a diner in Concord or working in a manufacturing job site in Columbia, South Carolina. I mean, it's all workers in terms of fighting for a broad middle class and people who aspire to the middle class.
And Mika, Senator Brown for the Dignity of Work tour just threw a dart at a map for the 4 states, and they came up Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina.
Yeah, in that order. And Connie and I will make this decision in March. I understand the cynicism of Morning Joe. Even without Morning Joe himself, the biggest cynic of all, I understand it. But no, we're going to those 4 states because we don't know. I mean, understand that almost everybody that's announced for president so far has been planning this for a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. I never thought I'd run for president. I've known a lot of you for a lot of years. You've never heard me talk about this, but I am concerned about winning. I'm concerned about this message of work that Democrats don't talk enough about. Someone said to me the other day that's followed this stuff for years. He said, no presidential candidate's really centered the campaign around work and what it means. And whether I run or not, I hope to have an influence on this narrative.
Senator Sherrod Brown, thank you so much for being on this morning.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
And still ahead on Morning Joe, White House press briefings. They're out, but the State of the Union is in. The president's team says it is pushing ahead on a yearly address to the public, despite the roadblock laid down by the House Speaker. The latest on the administration's moves to unilaterally manage the message.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.